Hi guys, since I started to review films earlier last year, I had the idea of basically giving my, 10 favourite films of the year, but there's just so many I want to mention, so I thought, why not make it 30? And what I've got here is basically just, my 30 favourite films of the year. I'll talk a little bit about them. If you've clicked on this video and you've seen the runtime, and you're like, fuck that shit, because I could talk for like an hour here, so you can just check the video description, and it's got like the list of them all, saves you watching the whole video. Also, before I get started, this is going by the UK release date, so there's films like True Grit, Black Swan, 127 Hours, they're not actually in this video, because if you've seen other people's videos you may be expecting those in there, but because this is going by the UK release date, some of those films aren't actually released here yet. And also, there's a flip side to that coin, because some of these films what I'll talk about were actually released 2009 in America at festivals and things. So anyways, now that I've just delayed this video for so long, the first film, number 30, is I Love You, Philip Morris. And here Jim Carrey plays a con man who is, he's happily married, he's got a kid, and he ends up coming out of the closet, as they say, and admits to being gay. And then eventually, he has a car accident, and then he goes to jail, and there he meets Ewan McGregor's character, who's Philip Morris. And the rest of the film is basically the relationship both in and out of jail. I found this to be a very funny film. It's a gay rom-com, so I was a bit apprehensive to see it at first. I don't consider myself to be a gay man. I'm pretty sure a few people at college will disagree. But, I thought this to be a very funny film. There's some film scenes in here which, if you're a bit homophobic, then you may want to avoid this film. It actually got released in March here in the UK. It didn't actually get released till November in America. I don't know if sorry, that was pretty rude, but I don't know if the majority of Americans are homophobic, but I found it to be a very funny and amusing film. And number 29 is a war film directed by Paul Greengrass, who directed 2 of the Bourne films, and it's Green Zone. Here, Matt Damon, he plays an American soldier who was sent into Afghanistan, or Baghdad, sorry, and it's set in 2003, and it's the story of, the soldiers go to certain towns and cities looking for WMDs, but they get there and they don't find any weapons. And Matt Damon, he believes that there's, sort of corruption in the intelligence, what he's getting, because he's getting the wrong information, so he tries to find out the truth. I thought it was a very good film. It reminded me of a lot of the Ridley Scott film Body of Lies with Leonardo DiCaprio, but I preferred this actually because it had, more action scenes, filmed really close up. It's also filmed, typical Paul Greengrass style. It feels very realistic. It doesn't feel like you're watching a film. It's definitely one to check out if you're into modern war films. It's not an action film. I wouldn't say it's an action film. It's more like a thriller. But still, check it out. Number 28 is one of 2 post-apocalyptic movies released in January, and it's The Road with Viggo Mortensen. And it's based on the novel by Cormac McCarthy. Basically, Viggo Mortensen plays a father who is trying to survive in a world, with his son, in just a post-apocalyptic world. I can't say it. And basically, the rest of the people, there's not many people, but the rest have resolved to cannibalism because there's not much food, and there's no animals, have survived. There's very little plants, and it's just a really sad, depressing film. I mean, it's really well done. But the reason why it's number 28 is because it's just really sad and depressing, the ending. It's just, why'd they have to do that? Because they ended it on such a downer, you know what I mean? And it'll just depress you throughout the rest of the day if you see it. But it is definitely one to check out if you're into, films which depict the future, had great shots, real ominous feel to it. Number 27 is one, not that many people enjoyed, and it's the remake of The Wolfman. I'm a huge fan of, Universal horror movies, and I thought this was a really well done horror remake. Basically, Benicio del Toro, he plays the part of Lawrence Talbot, and he's bitten by a werewolf, and he carries on the curse and becomes a werewolf himself. The reason why I liked it so much is it didn't use as much CGI as I thought. Rick Baker, I think his name is, he did the makeup for American Werewolf in London, which is, to me, the best werewolf film. Here he did the makeup on Benicio del Toro's face for the Wolfman. It looks really good, which is why I really like this. I like practical effects. It had great shots of the the woodland, great shots of the moon in the forest. I just really like this film. Number 26 is one I haven't yet got on DVD. It's not released yet, but it's Easy A. And here Emma Stone, who's in Superbad and Zombieland. She plays a teenager who pretends to lose her virginity in school, and rumour goes around, and she becomes known as the school slut. And there she's in English. She's learning about the Scarlet Letter, which is I'm not going to get all into it, but it was just a really funny teen girly movie. I mean, I didn't think I'd like it, but even though it is aimed at teenage girls, I still found it very funny and very enjoyable. Number 25 is I'm pretty sure for action fans, this is the film to see. It's The Expendables. I'm a big fan of action films, especially 80s films. This was a real big throwback here. Sylvester Stallone, he got such a great cast. I mean, you can just see there. Can you see that? All those, legends, I guess, in the business. Sylvester Stallone directs. We've got Jason Statham, Jet Li, Arnie, Mickey Rourke, Bruce Willis, Terry Crews. They're all in this. The tagline sums it up is every film has a hero. This one has them all. That just sums it up so well. If I were to nitpick, I could probably find more negative things to say about the film. But just as a mindless action film, it's really, really well done. One to check out. Sylvester Stallone really knows how to film. Hand-to-hand action shots, and the ending as well, with just an orgy of explosions and bullets. It's really well done. Number 24 is similar to The Road in the sense that it's really depressing, which is why it's fairly low on the list. It's Precious, its full name, Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. And here, Gabourey Sidibe, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but she plays a obese, illiterate teenage girl living in Harlem, and she has an abusive mother, and she's not doing well in school. She's actually pregnant with a second child from her father, and the film is basically her. She tries to move out of home, and she goes to sort of a special school, I guess, run by Paula Patton. And it's really well made film. Monique plays the mother. She's such an intimidating person, and you wouldn't know she's known for comedies. I think she's like a stand-up comedian. I didn't know that personally, but watching the film, I'd never have guessed that. Number 23 is a sequel, which I'll admit isn't as good as the first one, but I think just for a summer blockbuster popcorn film, it's really good. It's Iron Man 2, and here Jon Favreau returns for the sequel. He directs. He also has a much bigger part in this. I just really liked it. Not much to say really. I mean, Mickey Rourke, I thought he played a great villain, even though he was a bit underused. And Scarlett Johansson, I mean, obviously I like her. Don Cheadle, he plays the part of, War Machine. I forget his name. Roddy Rhodes, is it? But the one, Terrence Howard, who was in the first one, he didn't return. Sadly, I thought he was great in the first one, but here, Don Cheadle, he did a good job. I'm a big fan of other Don Cheadle films, and there's one later on in this video where he was in another film, which I'll talk about later. I don't want to spoil it. Number 22 is similar to Precious. It's The Blind Side. Sandra Bullock actually won an Oscar for Best Actress for a role as Lee Ann Tuohy, or Twocky, I don't know. But she basically takes in, a giant black kid and takes him to school, provides for him, becomes his adopted mother, and the film is actually based on a true story, an inspiring true story. I just thought it was really well done. It's actually pretty light-hearted. It's not the tearjerker that I was expecting. I didn't really cry at all, which is what I was expecting to cry. But I thought this was a really well uplifting film about sports, and even though I know very little about American football, I still found it to be very good. Number 21 is one I saw a few weeks ago. It's The Way Back, and I'll review it in more detail in the next video, but it's basically it's based on the true life story of a group of prisoners in a camp in Russia, and they walk across thousands of miles to get to India. And it's basically a survival film. You know, I guess you can put into the category of war film. It's happening in the Second World War. It was just a really, really well-made film. Peter Weir, who did Master and Commander, the Dead Poets Society, is it, and the Truman Show. You know, he directed this great. Also, if you plan on seeing it, Colin Farrell, look out for him. I mean, he's in the first half of the film and then he goes. I'm not saying that he dies, but he just goes. But the second half of the film, I honestly didn't care. But, you know, from what I remember, the first half was really, really well done. And like I said, I'll review it in more detail in the next video, so look out for that. Number 20 is The A-Team. And I like this so much more watching it on DVD because it's not the typical action summer blockbuster, you know, popcorn movie. And the reason why I liked it so much is the sort of relationship between the four characters. It was also well cast. I mean, Liam Neeson was perfect as Hannibal. Rampage Jackson, you know, Quentin Rampage Jackson, UFC fighter, he did a great job as the part of Mr. T, you know, B.A. Baracus. Also Charlotte Copley, he was hilarious as Murdoch, and Bradley Cooper, you know, from The Hangover, Valentine's Day, is it? He was also really good here. I mean, these four characters really made the film, but Joe Carnahan, who directed it, he directed Smoking Aces. I prefer this over Smoking Aces, to be honest. You know, it's not your typical summer action film. It's got over-the-top action sequences. I mean, if you don't like the idea of a flying tank, you know, firing to try and, you know, project itself into a lake. I don't know. I'm not good at explaining things, but, you know, if you're up for a good action film, you know, if The Expendables isn't really your thing, and if you can find a copy, then maybe you should buy The A-Team. Alright then. Number 19 is another film yet to be released on DVD here in the UK. It's Buried. And from what I remember, this was a really, really well-made film. Surprising how good a film can be with just Ryan Reynolds in a box, you know, making phone calls to people. But it was just really, really well-made, well-acted. You know, it's really claustrophobic, at times hard to watch, very downbeat. And, you know, the ending is so tense and gripping. But, you know, it is fairly depressing. But from what I remember in the cinema, it was really, really good. Number 18, and I personally love, you know, vampire films and especially sci-fi films as well. And you combine them and you get Daybreakers. This, you know, it's set in the near future, and basically everything that's run by people nowadays is run by vampires here. A plague has wiped out most of humanity. The few remaining humans are stored in these sort of huge warehouses or factories and you know, farmed for the blood. However, the blood's running out and the vampires are turning to evolve into these extreme vampires. Excuse me. And Ethan Hawke plays a scientist, you know, a vampire, and he's looking to find a blood substitute, and he stumbles upon a group of humans who claim to have found a cure for vampirism. And, you know, this was just a really well-made film. The CGI wasn't great, but, you know, I like the two directors. I've never seen the other films, but I've heard, you know, there was a zombie film which they made, apparently, you know, really low-budget independent zombie film, which I'll need to check out. But if you're a fan of sci-fi, horror films and vampire films, and, you know, avoid the Twilight films, because this is a true vampire film. Number 17 is a film I reviewed in my last video. It's Machete, and, you know, basically Robert Rodriguez made the full-length feature film of the fake trailer, which was in Grindhouse. It can be seen on the start of Planet Terror. I just really like this film. Great exploitation film, incredibly corny, incredibly cheesy, you know, bad acting at times, but that's what you like, you know. It's just a mindless, you know, exploitation film. It's definitely one to check out if you're a fan of Robert Rodriguez's other work. You know, I'm also pretty surprised how he managed to get Robert De Niro to act in this film. I mean, Robert De Niro's a legend, you know, he's probably the best actor alive, and for him to wear a Mexican outfit and just run around it's just really fun. It's just definitely one to check out on DVD. It's out in America now, I believe, on DVD. You know, just check it out. And number 16 is another one which I haven't got on DVD, but it's Unstoppable, the story about a runaway train, and Denzel Washington and Captain Kirk forced to, you know, catch up to the train and basically stop it. It's carrying a ton of biochemicals and it'll cause a huge explosion. You know, it's essentially a disaster film, but also it can put in the genre of action because it has great, intense, you know, gripping action sequences involving the train, just smashing through everything. Denzel Washington, you know, they didn't get a stuntman, he was actually on top of the train jumping over it. I just thought it was a really, really well-made action film. Speaking of Denzel Washington, he stars in the next film, in number 15, I believe, yeah, 15, is The Book of Eli, and here he stars as Eli, sort of a lone warrior who is ordered to escort a sacred book, you know, the Bible. That's not a spoiler, it's obviously the Bible, and he basically is ordered to carry it to a certain location by the coast, I believe, and Gary Oldman plays a sort of the bad guy, for lack of a better term, and he's after the book to sort of, you know, become a godlike character in the small town. I don't know, the story wasn't great, but the action was really well done. You know, it's the second post-apocalyptic film released in January. I just thought it was really, really good. You know, great visuals. Mila Kunis is hot as shit. Denzel Washington was great, you know, like I said, in Unstoppable. This was all him. Great fight choreography, especially the first one. He's got a sword. There's this guy with a chainsaw under the bridge, and you can just see the silhouettes of the characters, and there's also a bar fight. You know, the first half is definitely better than the second half. The third act to me just seemed to drag on a little bit too much, and I couldn't see where it was going, but, you know, fan of action films, this is definitely one to check out. Number 14 is another horror remake. It's The Crazies, and it's a remake of a 1970s George A. Romero film, and I never actually saw the original until I got this, because as you can see, it's a, can you see it? Yeah, 2-disc set. It's got both the remake and the original, and I managed to see the original, and I didn't really like it. I like the, you know, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, the other George A. Romero films, but to me The Crazies wasn't great. But the remake is certainly much better. You know, it's a bigger budget for one thing, and it's one of the best horror remakes I've seen, period, I think. And also it's one of the best horror films I've seen in recent years. Basically the story of a small town in Iowa, and a biological weapon which is being carried in a plane crash lands, and it infects the local water supply. The townspeople start to turn into the crazies, and the town comes under lockdown. And Radha Mitchell and Timothy Oliphant, I'm a big fan of their other work. They're a couple who must survive through, you know, all the chaos. And the reason why it's such a good film is you get to sympathise with the characters, which, you know, is lacking in most horror films nowadays. You actually care for the characters, and you don't want to see them go through what they're forced to go through, you know. But, you know, if you're a fan of horror films, The Crazies is definitely one to check out. It's not just your typical horror remake with jump scares. There is a certain number of jump scares, but they're really well done, and it's actually quite a scary film. In at number 13 is Crazy Heart. Here, Jeff Bridges won an Oscar for his role as Bad Blake, an old, washed-up country singer, and he ends up falling in love with Maggie Gyllenhaal's character. And the film is essentially, you know, a romance tale between the two, and how they're coping, living away from each other. And, you know, Jeff Bridges is an alcoholic in the film, and he starts to, you know, turn his life around, but the booze starts to sort of take over, and I'm not going to explain it because it's definitely one to check out. You know, I'm a huge fan of Jeff Bridges. I don't love country music, but after this film, I sort of, you know, in my heart, I loved it a lot more. And, you know, Rob Duvall, Colin Farrell, they're great in this film, even though they have fairly small roles. But Jeff Bridges, you know, he stole the show. I love The Big Lebowski. You know, there's a reference to The Big Lebowski here, actually. The first scene, the first gig which Bad Blake has is actually in a bowling alley, which, you know, you just expect to see Jesus in the background, you know. Number 12 is one a lot of people are going to disagree with me on. It is The Karate Kid, another remake. You know, I'm a big fan of karate films, martial arts films, and I'm a big fan of Jackie Chan. And, you know, Jaden Smith plays, what's his name? Dre Parker. I was going to say Daniel San from the original, but he plays Dre Parker, who he moves to China. I wouldn't really say it's a remake, really. It's just sort of inspired by it. And I know some people say, you know, he doesn't learn karate, it's kung fu, but I believe that there's another Jackie Chan film called The Kung Fu Kid. So I don't know if they could get the rights to Kung Fu. I don't know, but, you know, if you're a fan of martial arts films, this is definitely one to check out. it is very unrealistic, but it's a kids movie. I saw this with one of the most hyped crowds ever, and whenever something awesome happened, like the kick at the end, he does a backflip, kicks the guy in the tournament, and you know, the whole audience jumped out the seats, literally. I'm not making it up. And that's sort of why I like the film so much, because when I watch it now, I sort of remember the first time I watched it in the cinema, and it was just such an experience watching it. Number 11 is Predators. I was just super impressed with this film. You know, it's the sequel we've all been waiting for, because, you know, Predator 2 wasn't great. The first Alien vs Predator film I liked, but don't talk about the second one. Here, you know, a group of the world's deadliest people are abducted and dropped in on an alien planet, and they're hunted by the predators, you know, these extraterrestrial high-tech, you know, hulking creatures. I love this film, as you can guess. You know, it's in at number 11. Adrian Brody, I thought, was great in it as sort of the leader of the group, but also had a great cast. You know, Danny Trejo from Machete, Alice Braga from Crossing Over. You know, a great cast. Lawrence Fishburne as well. He had the best dialogue in the film. Real scary the way he says it, and just overall, it's just a really well made film. And there's just some real fun characters as well. I don't know the actor who played the sort of the cellmate, you know, the prisoner, but he was hilarious in the film. I don't know the actual quote, but it was something like 7 o'clock bitch raping time or something. It's just really funny, you know. If you plan on checking it out, just look out for that scene. Anyways, in the top 10 now, boy. Here, number 10 is Shutter Island. You know, another masterpiece by Martin Scorsese. It's a true mindfuck movie. I think Leonardo DiCaprio gave the best performance of his career here, as Teddy Daniels, a US Marshal who is sent to an island, Ashcliffe Prison, and it's basically a sort of asylum for the criminally insane, and one of the inmates has escaped, and it's his job basically to, you know, find out how she managed to get out of a room. You know, as Ben Kingsley put it, she just evaporated through the walls. This was just a really, really well made film. Incredible mindfuck movie, you know. I mean, if I watch it again, I'd probably have to, well, at least the first time I watch it, I'd have to pause it and then just think of what's going on, because it's just so crazy. There's so many things going on at once. He starts to have strange visions. It's similar to the film 1408 with Samuel L. Jackson. Obviously, you know, I preferred this over that. Martin Scorsese, you know, directs it. I love his other films. I prefer his crime films, you know, Taxi Driver and Goodfellas, but every now and again he goes back to horror and thriller, you know, Cape Fear, and I just really like this film. Hopefully he'll make more films like this. You know, definitely want to check out. Number 9 is another film which I reviewed in the last video. It's Monsters. And the reason why I like this so much, I know it hasn't got a great review or a great score on IMDb, but I loved it so much because it's made with a budget of £9,000, and watching it you really can't tell. And it's Gareth Edwards' first feature film. You know, it's sort of a sci-fi romance road movie, I guess. This is definitely one to check out if you're a fan of, you know, British cinema, independent sci-fi films. It's one of the best sci-fi films I've seen in the year, certainly better than that Skyline. Anyways, Monsters, go see it. And number 8 is another film I've yet to get on DVD. It's The Town, and it's directed by Ben Affleck, also stars Ben Affleck. Yeah, I can't really remember the story that well. All I remember is, you know, the rob a bank, and then Ben Affleck's character, he plays a thief. He falls in love with Rebecca Hall's character, and the film's sort of a semi-romance movie, but he can't tell her that he is a thief, so he's trying to hide the fact that he's a criminal from her. I don't know, I can't really explain it, but from what I remember, you know, Jeremy Renner from The Hurt Locker, he was amazing in this film. Also, the late great Pete Postlethwaite, you know, rest in peace. He died last year, I believe, in December. You know, he was a great actor. It's a shame to see him go. But also, you know, everyone involved in it was great. John Hamm especially, the FBI agent. It's definitely one to check out if you're a fan of crime thrillers. And it's sort of similar to Heat, I guess. I mean, it is no Heat, but certainly the action sequences is filmed so realistically, and you know it's just a real intense ride. Now I know Spill.com are going to disagree with me on this, but number 7 you have Robin Hood, the latest Ridley Scott film. It's sort of the prequel, I guess, to all the other Robin Hood films. Apparently, according to Ridley Scott, this is, you know, the true story of Robin Longstride. Basically, it's not the typical story, you know, you steal from the rich and give to the poor. It's the origin story, I guess. Russell Crowe returns, you know, but the thing with this film, I can't help but think of Gladiator and, you know, Maximus Decimus Meridius. I think Russell Crowe plays a really good Robin Hood, but I can't help but stop thinking about, you know, his role in Gladiator because it was so good. But overall, you know, it had great action sequences, especially the end, you know, the D-Day style fight scene, as well as the opening castle siege. It's just a really well made film. It's fairly long. I think it's, yeah, two and a half hours, so it's a lot to sit through. But surprisingly, there's a lot of films, a lot of scenes which got cut out for the theatrical release. This is the director's cut, as you can see. It's got something like, yeah, it's got 16 extra minutes, and the scenes with the cut out are actually really well done. But you know, it's definitely one to check out. I don't recommend it to everyone because Spill.com, who, you know, you should check out, but they actually gave the film some old bullshit, which is, you know, the second lowest rating they give, and I thought they were a bit harsh on the film. I mean, come on. Number 6 is another crime thriller. It's Brooklyn's Finest. I just absolutely love this film. I know not that many people see it. It didn't do too well, but it's directed by Antoine Fuqua, who directed one of my favourite films of all time, Training Day. Here, the reason why I liked it as well is because the writer, I forget his name, but he actually wrote the film because he needed the money. He saw an ad in the paper, and he just crashed his bike, I believe. He'd been in like sort of a car accident, and he needed the money to replace it, so he basically saw an ad in the newspaper to write a script for a film, and he wrote this. And you know, it's surprising because I don't think he'd actually wrote a script before. But Antoine Fuqua, you know, I guess he bought the script, then he made it into a film, and it's essentially 3 cop stories in one, and they sort of intertwine at the end. Richie Gere plays a cop on the edge of retirement. He's got about a week left, and he's finding it hard to you know, he's finding it hard to find sort of a life outside of police work, and you know, he starts falling in love with a prostitute, and he must train a rookie cop. And Don Cheadle, you know, he was in Iron Man 2. I love Hotel Rwanda, all the other films that he's been in, you know, the Oceans 11, 12 and 13 films. He plays an undercover cop who is ordered to take down Wesley Snipes' character, Kaz, but they've got such a close bond that he almost forgets what side he's fighting on. And it's, you know, the typical story, you know, it's done in loads of other films, but personally the storyline which I like the most and the character I like the most is Ethan Hawke. He was also in Training Day. He plays a cop who is struggling to support his growing family. He's got something like 10 kids, it's pretty ridiculous, and he basically plans on stealing, or you know, getting the money however he can, by stealing from the police force or by raids, or you know, getting criminals off the streets and stealing the money. It's just really well made film, very downbeat, you know, it's a very pessimistic film. Don't expect, you know, happy, jolly, you know, action sequences. That's not what you get. It's very downbeat. The script was great. I found it to be great. You know, real intense sequences. I think it's definitely one to check out if you're a fan of, you know, crime thrillers in general, especially cop films. You know, character study films. You know, just check Brooklyn's Finest out. Watch the trailer as well. The trailer's one of the best trailers of the year I've seen. Number 5 is one I was going to buy the other day. I had it in my hand, but you know, it's fairly new, so it's about £15, and I'm not paying that for a DVD. It's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I love this film. I love Edgar Wright's work. I love Shaun the Dead, Hot Fuzz. This film is essentially, I'm not going to go into the storyline, but it's essentially a comic book or video game movie, I guess, but it's not actually based on a video game. That's the good thing. It's got, you know, the hit combos. It's just a full-on action film. Edgar Wright, the director, he explains it. He says that it's similar to a musical, in the sense that in a musical people will just burst into sing-along and start dancing. Here, instead of dancing, they will fight. There's just constant fighting throughout. The script's brilliant. Just everything about it is great. It's definitely one to check out. Really fun film. Surprised that it didn't actually do too well in America or the UK. It should have done well because, you know, number 5, it's one of my favourite films of last year. Number 4 is another comic book movie. It's Kick-Ass, you know, the story of a teenage kid who wonders why there's no superheroes in the real world. So he buys a cheap suit online and he makes this persona of himself called Kick-Ass, but he finds it much harder than he expected. However, he becomes the target of Frank D'Amico, played by Mark Strong, and he basically must team up with Nicolas Cage and Chloe Moretz's character, who are this sort of crime-fighting duo, I guess, father and daughter. And I don't care what Chloe Moretz does in the future. To me, she will always be known as Hit Girl, because Hit Girl stole the show. She was amazing, you know. There's the famous line which he says, you know, "Alright, you cunts, let's see what you can do now." It's just a really fun superhero film. It's not your typical, you know, superhero film. It seems to spoof it, but then at the same time becomes its own superhero movie, and it's surprisingly dark as well sometimes. But you know, it's definitely one to check out. And number 3 is another film I've yet to get on DVD. It's yet to be released. I think it's released in America last week. Excuse me. It's The Social Network. Here, you know, it's the story about Facebook, the origin of the Facebook website. I think pretty much everyone is on Facebook. I don't have Facebook, but you know, I was surprised because it's number 3 in this list, because I was surprised how a film about Facebook would really appeal to me. You know, I love David Fincher's work, with the exception of Alien 3. But you know, this was just a really well made film, one of the best scripts in recent years. Jesse Eisenberg, you know, he deserves to at least be nominated for an Oscar. I'm not sure if the actual, you know, nominees have been announced, but he deserves to at least be nominated for an Oscar. But also Andrew Garfield and Justin Timberlake, I thought they were also very good. To me, Andrew Garfield gave the best performance of the film. You know, Andrew Garfield's gone on to be the new Spider-Man in the Sony reboot, which I'm not sure about. I can't really see him in an action role, but in The Social Network he was great. Number 2, ooh, nearly there, and it is Shine! Toy Story 3. I cried like a fiend at this, especially that fucking incinerator scene. You know, I cried so much. I went to see this with my mum and dad in theatres, and I absolutely loved it. The quote on the back of the box, I think, sums it up. "The perfect film does not and cannot exist, but if it did, it would probably look a lot like this." Actually, the second time I watched it on DVD, I was actually considering putting it number 1, because I grew up with the Toy Story films, and this one left such a huge impact on me because, you know, the other 2 films I'd seen when I was young. This one I actually saw when I was like, you know, about 16 I was. You know, this is just, if you're into animated films, this is definitely one to check out. And if you're not into animated films, check it out. Check the other 2 Toy Story films out as well. You know, just really well made films. Definitely, you know, I think there's sort of a war with Pixar and DreamWorks, but really DreamWorks, all they have is Shrek. Pixar, you know, every Pixar film is just incredible. You know, Toy Story 3 is probably, it's up there with Finding Nemo and WALL-E as my, you know, favourite animated film of all time. It's definitely one to check. And number 1, it's been a long time, but we finally got there. The favourite film of 2010 is bum 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 bum. Oh yeah, Inception. You know, Christopher Nolan made one of the best films of his career. You know, it's up there with The Dark Knight as being one of his best films. I'm not even going to attempt to describe the storyline because I'll be here for another hour. But if you haven't seen Inception, go check this out. Go buy it from the store. You know, don't just download it from some website where you can only get it off. Buy it in the store, buy it on Blu-ray. I bet it looks awesome in Blu-ray. I'd have loved to have seen this in IMAX. Not 3D. I think there was sort of some speculation going on that it would be released in 3D. I'm glad it wasn't. It's just definitely definitely want to check out. The action sequences are amazing. You know, the cast was great. You know, Tom Hardy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Leonardo DiCaprio, who was also in Shutter Island. I think he gave the best performance in Shutter Island, but here he was great. And you know, like I said, I'm not even going to attempt to describe the storyline. So yeah, I'll just end this video here. Thanks for you guys for watching. I can't get my words out. You know, check out my future videos. Next video I'll review 127 Hours, The Way Back, like I said, and The Green Hornet. And then, you know, after that I'll review Black Swan, True Grit. I'm so looking forward to seeing it. And I don't know whatever else I'll see. But anyways, thanks guys for watching. Thanks guys for subscribing. Hopefully I'll, you know, carry on reviewing films in 2011. What with university and tuition fees and stuff, I'm not sure how long I'll be able to keep it up, but I'll try my best to see as many films as I can and review them for you guys. So yeah, until then, peace out y'all.